All right, well, please help me welcome warmly Linda Fellion.
Sorry, I'm not doing my job. I know.
So good afternoon, boys and girls.
Good afternoon, Ms. Fellion.
I'm a spellbinder storyteller, and many of you may know that spellbinders don't read to you from a book. We tell you a story, and that means there aren't any pictures for you to look at. So you have to use your imagination, which means that we create the story together, because Alex's story may look different than Diana's story. And that's one of the fun things about hearing a story aloud, because we create the story together. I help create it with my words, and you help create it with the pictures you create in your imagination. So before we get into it, we need to get our ears and our brains ready to listen to the story. And I like to wake up my brain with knock-knock jokes. So knock-knock.
Who's there?
Annie.
Annie who?
Anybody want to hear a story?
Yes.
One other thing I need to share before we get going is my storyteller shawl. Now this shawl is really special for a couple of reasons. The first reason is it was hand woven for me by a very dear friend. The second reason is that as my friend was weaving the shawl, which you can imagine might take a long time, she listened to stories to help pass the time. Some of them might have been on DVD or on their iPod, but through the magic of the weaver's art, as she listened to stories, the stories got tangled up in the yarn, and they're now embedded in my shawl. And you can see them as all these little splotches of color. So every month when I come back to you, we're going to reach into this shawl and bring out a story to share together. So my first story is a Halloween story. And we don't know who originally wrote the story, but it was adapted for Spellbinders by a woman named Nora J. Heaton. That means that she wrote it out the way she heard it so that we could all learn the story. The name of the story is Big Ghost, Little Ghost. Charlie was just 6, and his brother Martin was 12 when they moved to a farm in the country. Now Martin loved the farm immediately, but Charlie was a little too scared to really enjoy the farm much. There were so many new things. He looked at the huge cow whose tail switched back and forth, and that scared Charlie. And then he watched the pigs, and they grunted and made horrible noises in their pen, and that scared Charlie. And even the chickens that pranced around the barnyard, looking like they would pack anyone who got too close, scared Charlie. But the scariest part of all was the path that wound through the dark woods to the mailbox. Now, Charlie's mother knew he was scared. She said, "Charlie, I know you're only 6 years old, but even 6-year-olds can overcome their fears. So when something scares you, I want you to try to be very brave, stand very still, and look at what's scaring you and see if there really is anything there that's going to hurt you. I think you'll find there's not very much on the farm that's going to hurt you." So Charlie decided to give it a try. And he went and peeked into the barn to look at the cow. And as he watched, he realized that when she was swishing her tail, she was just trying to scare away the flies. And that little tail wasn't going to hurt Charlie. And then he went and looked at the pigs, and as they were grunting and making those horrible noises, he realized they were just fighting to get to the food. And they were far too busy trying to eat to bother about Charlie. so they weren't going to hurt him either. And even the chickens, who looked like they were peck anyone who got close, when Charlie ran at them, they scattered in a flurry of cock-a-doodle-dooing and cluck-cluck-clucking. And he realized the chickens were more afraid of him than he was of them. But the trail through the woods to the mailbox was a lot harder. It took Charlie several weeks before he could walk calmly down the trail through the woods. So it was the night before Halloween, and Charlie started off to the mailbox, and Martin saw him, and he had an idea, and he ran in the house and grabbed an old sheet, cut holes in it for eyes, and threw it over his head, and he ran through the back field to the gate at the end of the path, and he was going to wait till Charlie came around the corner on the last bend of the path, and he's going to jump out scared. Well, Charlie's parents had been so proud of him that they gave him a little monkey as a pet, as a reward for being so brave. And what Martin didn't know was that Willie, the monkey, was watching him as he threw the sheet over his head. And you may know that monkeys love to imitate. And so Willie ran into the house and grabbed a white towel and threw it over his head, and he went back to the fields behind Martin. Well, just then Charlie was coming around the curve, and he saw the ghost by the fence, and he ducked behind a tree. And he stood there shivering, and he peeked back out, and he realized the ghost was waiting for him. And he stood there, shivering and afraid. And about that time, Willie came up behind Martin. And just as Charlie peeked out again, Willie grabbed the sheet and pulled it off of Martin. And Martin looked around and saw the little ghost and screamed and went running down the path to home. And Charlie realized that the ghost was just Martin trying to scare him. And he yelled out, "Big ghost, are you scared of the little ghost?" And he laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed. And that was the best Halloween that Charlie ever had. So that's the story of Big Ghost, Little Ghost. So I have another knock-knock joke. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Harry?
Harry who?
Hurry up and get ready to listen, because we have another story. The name of this story is The Burning Fields, and it's a Japanese folk tale. We also don't know who wrote this story originally, but it's been told in Japan for years and years and years. And you may know that Japan is an island nation, which means it's surrounded by water, and that there are often a lot of earthquakes in Japan, and that can create a tidal wave that sometimes does more damage even than the earthquake. So a long time ago in Japan, there was a farmer named Hamaguchi. His farm was on a high plateau halfway up the mountain. That's like a flat shelf of land. And behind the farm, the mountains reached way into the sky. But in front of the farm, the land sloped gently down to the shore. And at the base of the mountain was a small village with about 100 thatched roofed houses and a beautiful temple. One summer fall morning, Hamaguchi was sitting on his porch with his grandson, looking down at the village and out at the sea with the sun glistening on it. Well, the villagers were getting ready for the harvest festival. The rice harvest had been especially good this year. The village was decorated, the people were in their colorful clothing, and they were just getting ready to join in a harvest dance when Yamaguchi's house shook. And it settled for a minute, and it shook again. And then it quivered one last time. Now, Hamaguchi had been through many earthquakes, so he was not very worried until he looked down at the ocean and saw the water rushing away from the shore. The people in the village didn't know what to make of it. They ran to the beach to look at this phenomenon. Never seen anything like this before. But Hamaguchi had had an experience similar to this when he was a very little boy. And he knew what the ocean could do. There wasn't time to warn the villagers. There wasn't even time to yell to the caller in the tower of the temple. So he hollered to Yanni, his grandson, says, Yanni, light a torch. Yanni was confused. He didn't know why his grandfather wanted a torch, but he lit a torch. Yanni grabbed the torch and he ran to his fields where his rice harvest for the year was stacked up, waiting to be sold. And he lit the first stack, and the flames burst up, and he ran to the second stack. And Yanni said, Grandfather, why are you setting your rice on fire? Hamaguchi had no time to answer. He ran to the next stack, and stack after stack, until his entire field was aflame, and the flames reached the sky, and the smoke billowed up to the clouds. And the caller in the tower, in the temple in the village, saw the flames and rang the huge bell, and everyone in the village turned and looked up the mountain. In Japan, whenever there's a fire, all the villagers are required to run to help put it up. And everyone in the village starts scrambling up the mountain. Old men and young boys, women and girls, mothers with babies on their back, and even really little children ran up the mountain to help Hamaguchi put his fire out. But when they got there, it was too late. All the fields were burned. His entire wealth, everything he had in the world, was gone. What a tragedy. How could this have happened? Grandfather did it himself. He burned up his own field. He's gone mad. Hamaguchi, why would you do such a thing? Why would you burn your own fields? Look to the ocean, and you will see my purpose. And the villagers turned, and what they saw made them scream with terror, but their voices were drowned out as a huge wall of water crashed into the mountain and rushed away, dragging with it the houses and the fields and even the beautiful temple. And it rushed again to the mountain and hit one more time and a third time, with a little less force each time. And finally the sea was calm again. But all that was left of the village was a few thatched roofs floating on the ocean. And then the people realized that Hamaguchi had sacrificed his rice harvest, his entire wealth, all he had in the world, to create a warning for them. Because the village was destroyed, but all of the people from the village were saved on the mountainside. And then they looked at Hamaguchi, and they bowed deeply to him, and they thanked him with all their heart. And that's the story of the burning fields. And I have one more knock-knock joke. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Liz.
Liz who?
Listen to me, because we have one more story. The name of this story is The Rich Man's Guest, and it's a Turkish folk tale, and it is from a book called Fables from Afar by Christine C. Christ. Once, in a land long ago, but not so far from here, there was a very wise king. And one day he was riding through his land, and he saw a huge, beautiful house. Whose house is this? And his servant answered, this is the house of the richest man in the kingdom. He's known far and wide for the wonderful feast he gives for all his rich friends. Well, what does he do for the poor? Why, nothing, Your Majesty. The king sadly went home. The next morning, he got up and he dressed himself in rags and walked back to the rich man's house. And the rich man was sitting out in front of his house, enjoying the morning sun. And the king in his rags said, good sir, could you please spare me some food and let me rest for a while in your beautiful house, for I am tired and hungry. And the rich man says, get away from my house. I don't want any beggars here. I'll have my servants beat you if you don't go away. So the king sadly walked home. The next morning, he got up and put on his rags again, but this time over his rags, he put a beautiful silk cloak encrusted with gold and jewels. And he walked once again to the rich man's house. Well, the rich man was once again sitting in front of his magnificent house, enjoying the sun. And he saw the man in the gorgeous coat approaching. And he ran to him and said, "Welcome, good sir, come into my house. I always love to have someone such as you in my home." And he prepared a beautiful feast for him. He said, "You are always welcome here." And the king sat and he took little pieces of the food and tucked it into his cloak. And the rich man was astonished. He said, "Why aren't you eating the beautiful feast I prepared for you? Why are you putting the food in the cloak?" "Because it is my cloak you want to feed and not me. I came to you yesterday dressed in rags and you chased me away. Today I come to you in a golden cloak and you prepare me a feast. Yet I am the same man today that I was yesterday." And with that he threw off his beautiful cloak and revealed the rags. And the rich man was ashamed. And he said, "Forgive me, great Lord. Forgive me. I have been selfish and foolish. Never again will a poor man come to my door and be chased away, for you have taught me that a person is more than their clothing." And that's the story of the rich man's house. And we have one more knock-knock joke. Knock-knock.
Who's there?
Ima.
I'm a who.
I'm going to come back next month to share more stories with you. The last thing we have to do before we go is roll up the cloak, the scarf, so that all of the stories will stay here and they will be waiting for us when I come back.